Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We are beginning the book of Leviticus this morning, this Shabbat. We finished the book of Exodus with the building of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. We had an interesting conversation last week about that. And we are now beginning the P source. So we have four sources that go into creating the Pentateuch, the 5 books collection, which is actually 6 books, but that's another conversation. So our 5-book collection, our sources are J, E, P, and D. So J and E are oldest sources that go into making up the oldest texts that we have. That is edited by P to some extent. P is the priestly author. So we have the priestly material. And then D, of course, is the Deuteronomist. So Deuteronomy is a whole different school, a whole different philosophy. We're not sure, but possibly D redacted J, E, and P. Some people say P redacted most of it. D is added on. It doesn't matter for today. What we're studying today is the P source. We are beginning the Levitical material. This is the priestly material. For a lot of people, this is the material that seems the least applicable to our time and our day because it is very much about the functioning of the sacred space that was the Mishkan and later the temple. But of course, it was the temple retrojected onto the Mishkan, right? The fantasy of the Mishkan. This is really about the temple and the way that the Israelites were to worship in the temple. Because of that, and because of animal sacrifice, most folks don't know what to do with this material other than, okay, we're supposed to read it, so we'll read it. The older I get, the longer I study this material, the more I resonate with P. Actually, more than J and E. So as much as I love the Genesis texts and the Exodus narratives and parts of Numbers, the anthropomorphism of God in those sources is something I'm always having to kind of reconstruct and work around. Not so with P. With P, God is a force, God is an energy, and there are ways to work in line with that and to channel that, and there are ways to frustrate the contact with that. We don't have the same understanding that if I do X, I'm going to get like blown up by a nuclear power force. I do, however, relate to P's idea of the divine more than I do J and E. Or D, right? D, the Deuteronomist, has a God who says, because y'all messed up, you're getting kicked out of the land. P's God doesn't have emotions, doesn't get angry, doesn't love people, doesn't have a, direct relationship with people. P's God is a force. And that is very much how I relate to the divine and understand the divine. There are implications to the divine being a force that we want to magnify being present. There are things that keep that force from being able to be present. One of those is sin. So the dross of sin is drawn to sacred places. When the dross of sin is on a sacred space, the divine force, which is all good, all pure, all holy, can't be there. That sort of lines up, oddly, with my theology. When we don't behave with each other the way we're supposed to, when we don't talk to ourselves the way and treat ourselves the way we're supposed to, the force that is all goodness and holiness and justice and compassion and whatever, those things that I identify with the divine, are lessened. The concentration of it is lessened. When we treat each other well and work for the good of all and work to line up with conserving and not wasting and appreciating and not taking for granted and all of those things, for me, the force that I call God is magnified and more concentrated, more present, if I can use those terms. For me, that is way closer to my theology than J, E, or D. So I just want to put that out there as maybe a way to start reconstructing our relationship to some of these texts that we're going to be looking at. It isn't just really primitive ways of understanding whatever, and we've evolved from there. I don't believe that. As an anthropologist, I really appreciate the primitive approach and the ways that we still are human beings and have been since we were in the trees and on the savannah. Parts of us have not changed. And also, I feel like it diminishes the power and the revolutionary ideas of P. To take God out of both being the king and giving us yet a way to relate to this God that is invisible, that is a force, not a being, without feelings, without preferences. That is a revolutionary move if you think about it. In the ancient world where everything was to propitiate the gods, whether the god is king or not king or whatever, or many gods, gods get angry, they throw thunderbolts at each other, and humans are in the way, they get, whatever. So we are moving way far away from that with P. Way far away. And for me, it's kind of revolutionary. Okay, anyway, so I'm going to stop my apologetics for P and the priestly sources. We're going to be talking about sacrifice. We're going to be talking about animal sacrifice. So those of you who have heard me talk about this before, forgive me, but I feel like I really need to say it as we begin studying Leviticus. Sacrifice is often seen, again, as some primitive form of worship that substitutes the victim, the korban, the sacrifice, for the person offering it, and therefore is a stand-in for what we deserve, and this poor animal takes the brunt of it. There is some of that in the Israelite sacrificial system. However, it is far more sophisticated than that. And actually, again, the longer I study these texts, the more I experience the world and life and our consumption and our feelings of entitlement to consumption, the more I appreciate sacrifice as a system. Why? We eat meat whenever we want. We can afford to. It's accessible. Walk into any grocery store, and lining the grocery store is refrigerated sections and frozen sections filled with dead animal. Filled with dead animal. We pick what we want, we throw it in the basket, we take it home. You've heard me say this before. If I forget to cook it, it spoils, I throw it in the garbage can. That is a complete waste of animal life. And P would be shocked, and that whole system would be horrified by that casual approach to the death of an animal. Horrified. In the Levitical sacrificial system, only sacrificial meat could be consumed, and only in the sacred precinct. Think about that. The only meat you could eat was meat that you brought as a sacrifice. Who had to participate in that sacrifice? The Levites, the priests, and you had to eat it all. You couldn't freeze some of it for later when you feel like you want it again. If you take that animal's life and it's for an occasion, whatever that occasion is, then you have to consume that animal. So they didn't have freezers, right? But you can't salt the meat and use it as jerky, let's say, right? So you have to discard that, which meant you didn't want to waste that meat. Meat is expensive in the ancient world. It's expensive now if we paid what it actually costs, right? We don't. We subsidize farmers and whatever, so we don't pay the real cost. If we did, it would be very expensive. So you you didn't waste it. You ate it with your community, so that you got a group together that was big enough to consume all that meat. And you fed the priests. And God got part of that animal in the form of smoke, and therefore you were eating that meal with the divine. That is a very different understanding of taking an animal's life than going to the grocery store today. The other thing is that there was recognition that there was blood involved. The blood is the life force of the animal, and it is not ignored. We look at the grocery store and the meat is just on white styrofoam and everything is so clean. There's no blood. So we are able to kind of separate ourselves from the death of an animal because it's so sanitized, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. In the ancient world, when they offered a sacrifice, there was a lot of blood involved. And that blood was not just dumped. That blood was understood to be a precious force for bringing together the community and the divine by cleansing the communal space of sin. The life force directly is the only thing that can get rid of the death force in life. Death in life, that is sin for P. Sin is death in life. The only way to get rid of that is the life force, blood. Okay, but you can't just slaughter something and use its blood because it's time to clean. There were times where it was mandated, and then if you brought a sacrifice, that blood was dashed on the altar. It was never taken for granted that you took a life to eat meat. Okay. So I'm going to go one step past it. Those of you who've learned with me for years, you've heard me say this a million times. This is nothing new. I want to go past it this time. So I wanted bring everybody up to speed who hasn't learned with us. But I'm going to go past it this year. And we're going to look at another layer even of the meaning of this stuff. Because y'all know I don't rest on my laurels. So we're in Leviticus 1:1. So we're beginning the very beginning of the book of Leviticus. Vayikra el Moshe vayidaber Adonai elav me'oel moed lemor. So look at the little aleph. There's lots written on the little aleph. This is a scribal tradition. We did that one year. You can go back. Bert labels everything so beautifully that you can find our discussion of the little aleph. I don't remember what year that was. So God speaks to Moshe saying, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when a person Ki yakriv mikim korban. All right. Look at the verbiage. What is the verb here? To bring a sacrifice. Like that's all you get in the English. To bring, presents an offering. But what is the word in Hebrew? To bring close. From the root kuf, resh, vet. Karov, close. Yakriv. This is hifil. This is the causative form. When someone causes to come close from y'all, a closifying thing, right? Kuf, resh, bet, meaning sacrifice. Ladonai, to Yud He Vav He. Min ha-behema, from the herd. Min ha-bakar, umin hatzon, from the herd or the flock. Takrivu et korbonechem. You shall bring it close. At korban, y'all's closifying things. All right. So I'm tangling the translation on purpose. Because when any of you presents an offering of cattle to God, that just does not do it. When you bring close something that is about bringing the divine close from the cattle, the herd, or the flock, you shall bring it. You shall bring it close, the thing that makes y'all close, right? So this is very much purposeful language around what the whole purpose of sacrifice is. Im olah korbonav min habakar zachar tamim yakrivenu el petach ohel moed yakrivoto lirtzono lifnei Adonai. If you're making an olah, so this is the Holocaust, the completely burnt offering from the herd, then it shall be zachar, male, tamim, without blemish. You shall bring it near to the opening of the Ohel Moed, to the tent of meeting. You shall bring it close to be acceptable lifnei Adonai, before God. V'samach yado al rosh ha'olah, and he shall put, meaning the Israelite, shall put his hand on the head of the Holocaust, that it may be offered on your behalf in expiation for you. The person has to declare that this is his animal, and the way we do that is laying the hands on the head, and that now has the animal stand in for the person, and that allows it to make expiation on behalf of the person. The bull shall be slaughtered before God, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall offer the blood. But again, it's not offer. V'hikrivu, they shall bring close et hadam, the blood. V'zarku et hadam, and they shall dash the blood on the altar, and petach ohel moed, and at the opening of the tent of meeting. This is a precious substance. It is to be used appropriately. It is an important substance. It is not just, oh, well, there's the blood of the animal. Okay, whatever. Now I want us to look a little closer than we usually do at this part. V'hishpit et ha'olah v'nitachota linitacheha. The burnt offering, the olah, the Holocaust, shall be flayed, meaning you remove the skin, which is what we do whenever we eat meat. V'nitachota, and you shall cut it up into cuttings, right? Into pieces. And the sons of Aaron the priest shall put fire on the altar and lay out wood upon the fire. This is getting ready the grill, right? The barbecue. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall lay out the sections with the head and the suet on the wood that is on the fire upon the altar. So the sections get divided of the animal. The head and the suet is on the wood closest to the fire. Remember that. Its entrails and legs shall be washed with water, and the priest shall turn the whole into smoke on the altar as a burnt offering, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to God, right? What God gets from this is reach nichoach, a pleasing smell, the smell of smoke, the smell of fat burning, the suet, the fat burning on the grill. That is what is offered to God. But with the olah, in the case of the olah, everything is offered. The entire thing is an olah, is a holocaust. If your offering for a burnt offering is from the flock of sheep or of goats, you shall make your offering a male without blemish. Notice, it is the same process. It shall be slaughtered on the north side of the altar, and Aaron the priest shall dash its blood against all sides of the altar. Whether it's a bull or from the flock of sheep or goats, and then we're going to get, and it's the same with, it'll be cut up into sections. The priest will lay them out, the head and the suet first, entrails and legs shall be washed, and then it's offered up. What do we do if it's a bird? What if you choose your offering from turtle doves or pigeons? Then again, the same thing. The head comes off, right? And the blood is drained, and he shall remove its crop with its contents and cast it into the place of the ashes. So there's parts of it that are put with the ashes. There are parts of it that are separated out to be where the ashes are going to be carried to the outside of the camp. The priest tears it open, turns it into smoke on the altar. Again, this is what happens with an olah. When a person presents an offering of grain, the offering shall be of choice flour. Oil will be poured on it and frankincense. And this is the way the priest will do it. Scoop out a handful, blah, blah, blah. Notice this is all said the same way. All of this. If your offering is a grain offering on a griddle, it shall be of choice flour with oil mixed in, unleavened. Okay, so here we go. This is the exact same language is being used, and I'm pointing that out for a reason. You offer it with salt, blah, blah, blah. That's 2 chapters. Now we're going to get a different kind of offering. We're going to get the shlamim. All right, I want to stop here. Why did I harp on the fact that all of these ways, all of these different kinds of offerings for an olah, for a Holocaust? Why am I harping on the fact that the language is exactly the same for all of them? Yes, Susan.
Because a person who brought grain for the sacrifice or a group of people had the same relationship as someone who could afford to bring a bull from their herd.
Beautiful. Susan Cohen gets the gold star. What is critical and what people overlook is that it is exactly the same language. Not, and if you're so poor that all you can bring is grain, right? It's like if your offering is a bull, if your offering is from the flock, if your offering is a bird, it goes down all the way to the poorest offering, which is grain. There is no distinction between the bull, which is buying the wing of a hospital, and putting $5 in the jar. There's no difference in the language or the description. For me, that is a democratization that we just don't see, even in the modern world, right? You know, we've been arguing over where do we put the names in the new sanctuary? How big do we make the names? Are these names bigger than those names? Do these names go before those names? Do we do alphabetically? It's like, you have to, like, we get it. Like, and Rabbi Rubin always says, you know, these places are not built anonymously. They are not built by nobody. Putting names up shows you these are built by actual people, the sanctuary, whatever. So whatever our relationship to that, notice the democratization of the offerings. There is no difference in the language. Whether you can offer a bull that feeds, a clan or a tribe, or all you have is a grain offering, which is essentially pancakes on the griddle. Okay? I think that's really important, and I think we miss that a lot. This is the move of P. This is a democratizing move. If you think about Abraham, you think about the ancestors, you think about the patriarchs and the matriarchs, they're wealthy. This is a democratizing move by P. Now we get the shlamim. From shalem, shalom, whole. W-H-O-L-E. So when you have a sense of being whole, also this is translated in ancient Hebrew as greeting. Like when you ask after somebody shalom, that's how you greet someone. So sometimes this is called the offering of greeting. You just want to come hang out with God. You just want to greet God. You want to be with God because you feel a sense of wholeness and fullness in your life. If you offer of the herd, male or female, you shall bring it before God, one without blemish. We go through the same process, laying your hands, slaughtering, then present from the sacrifice of well-being as an offering by fire to God, the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is about the entrails. That's what goes to God. So again, the animal's going to be separated. It's going to be dismembered. It's going to be taken apart. And certain pieces are going to go to certain parts of the system. What did I just say? The fat, the suet that covers the entrails, and the fat around the entrails goes to God. the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them, that is at the loins, and the protuberance on the liver, which you shall remove with the kidneys. Aaron's son shall turn these into smoke on the altar, with the burnt offering that is upon the wood that is on the fire, as an offering by fire of pleasing odor to God. What does God get of the animal? God gets the suet that covers the entrails, the 2 kidneys with its fat, and the protuberance on the liver. This all goes to God. Okay? If you have a sheep, this is what you're going to do with it. You're going to dash the blood, and you're going to lay your hands on it, blah, 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 blah. The whole broad tail, which you shall remove close to the backbone, the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is about the entrails. These go to whom? God. The 2 kidneys and the fat that is at the loins and the protuberance on the liver, these go to God. Same with a goat. Then we're going to get the process for a chatah, a sin offering. And we're going to get it laid out. Who gets what part of that? What does God get? The process is a little different. We get the sprinkling of blood 7 times in front of the curtain of the Holy of Holies. So this is a little bit different when it's for expiation of sin. Then blood goes on the horns of the incense altar in the tent of meeting. The rest of the blood is poured at the altar of burnt offering at the entrance. Right? The fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is about the entrail, the kidneys, the loins, the protuberance on the liver. Where does this go? It's turned into smoke. Okay. So what happens to the skin with its flesh, the head and the legs and the dung? What happens with that? It's carried to a pure place outside the camp, to the ash heap, and burn it up in a wood fire. It shall be burned on the ash heap. This is discarded. Okay. Now we get the process where if the whole community has sinned. All right. So what we're going to get in the rest of these descriptions is this is what goes to God. This is the part of the animal that goes to the priests to eat. We had a whole conversation about that one year, right? That this was a pretty good system for the priests. No wonder they have this material saying we get this part, right? Encourage sacrifice and you have more meat to eat, right? So there's a pushback against the priestly system saying, wait a minute, right? This is kind of rigged. So a pushback against sacrifice as the way to the holiness code is a pushback against that. But anyway, so the priests get a certain amount, and then the person bringing the sacrifice and their clan eat another part of the animal. Okay. Every single sacrifice except the olah has a division of what God gets, what the Kohanim and the Levites get, and what the offerer gets from the animal, and what is waste. Okay? What goes to the ash heap. Everything. Mary Douglas, we've talked about her work before, the anthropologist Mary Douglas. We've talked about her work when we talked about Tuma and Tahara, purity and impurity. What I didn't realize till I was studying for this week, what I didn't realize is she revised all of that work that she did on Leviticus and the purity system. She revised it all in 1999. She revised it and wrote a book called Leviticus as Literature. And went back to those texts and said, it's not so much about dealing with, like the stuff and then the fear of impurity. Like she doesn't totally negate her earlier argument, but she really moves past it to argue that Leviticus is giving us the same thing that we got in creation. The Levitical sacrificial system is dismemberment, separation, in order to come to a different kind of wholeness. Wow, Tamara says. So the animal is whole, the person is whole. You bring the animal, you've now designated it as something that's going to bring you close to God and God close to you. The animal now changes into something else. It changes into the mechanism by which we're going to come closer to the divine. Once that happens, something different has to happen with the animal. The same way God looks at tohu vavohu, the undifferentiated unity that is pre-creation, and God decides there's going to be creation, there's going to be a world that has functions in it. What has to happen to tohu vavohu? Tohu vavohu has to be separated into its components. Only then do you have functioning parts that can create a different whole. The universe. The Big Bang. Yes, Susan. Without the Big Bang, without the splitting apart of everything, you don't have anything. You just have it. Right? Capital I, if you will. Douglas argues that is the same with sacrifice. You don't just eat an animal. You don't get to just kill something and consume it and dump its life force on the ground. You designate it as something that is going to bring you closer to the divine, not just you, your clan and the priests. You're eating this meal with the divine. The divine gets some of it. The priest gets some of it, and you eat some of it. But once you lay your hands on its head and designate it as that, a korban, a drawer closer, now something has to happen. What has to happen? Separation. And in the separating of the animal, that achieves the wholeness of relationship in a new way between us and the divine. Just like creation. Now, she goes further. Don't even just read that it's different parts that belong to the different things, but rather read the body of the animal is the same as the Mishkan and Sinai. How, you might ask? What is given to God that we just read? What is burned up and given to God? The entrails. Yeah, so the head is put there. The entrails, the suet covering the entrails, the kidneys, and the liver. Where is that located in both animals and humans? The most interior. Where is the holiest place in the Mishkan? The most interior. Rachel's like, the most interior space of the Mishkan is the holiest, reserved for God only, except once a year. Douglas argues that is exactly what is happening with the animal. You are offering to the divine the innermost interior part of the animal, because that belongs to God. That is the holiest. What is the suet that is forbidden to people to eat? The suet is the fat that, you all can't see my hands, but I'm doing a very good job of illustrating for you what the suet is. Right. The suet is the fat that covers the entrails. What would that be in the Mishkan? That would be the parochet. That would be the curtain between the Holy of Holies and the next part of the Mishkan. The suet is the parochet. So forbidden to humans, because it's the divider between the Holy of Holies and the next part of the Mishkan, the next part of the tabernacle. Who gets to be in the next part of the tabernacle? The next outer layer? Who gets to be in there? Priests. Only the high priest gets to go into the Holy of Holies. The priests can be in the next section. So who do you think gets the next layer out of animal? Priests. The layer after that, right? Israel. The people who bring it get to eat it themselves. The rest is outside the camp. Just like a leper or anybody else who is suffering from tum'ah, where it's not useful right now to be in direct relationship with the divine, it is outside the camp. Douglas is arguing this whole sacrificial system is mimicking creation, as does the Mishkan, as does Sinai. It describes a pulling apart and ordering of things that allows for a different kind of wholeness. Where do we see that with Sinai? Who's at the top of Sinai where the cloud comes down? Who's there? Cloud is suet. Cloud is the parochet, right? Is the curtain. That's the cloud. So who's allowed to be up there in the cloud? Only Moshe. Only Moshe can be with Adonai up there. Right? Just like only the high priest can be in the Holy of Holies. What's the next level down? Kind of mid-mountain. Who's there? Remember? Joshua, Caleb, and the 70 elders. Just like the next part of the Mishkan, where only the priests and Levites can be, right? Then, who's at the foot of the mountain? Amcha, Yisrael, the schleppers, us. At the bottom of the mountain, at the foot of the mountain. Same thing. Sinai, Mishkan, universe. Somebody does something wrong and wants to make it whole. The relationship. You have to go through the same separation of things into their order to make the relationship whole again on the other side. Okay. Should we look at someone else describing it, not just me? I didn't make this up, people.
But it's so informative.
It's so informative. I feel like it's just it helps me so much appreciate the complexity of the understanding of our relationship to the cosmos and to the source of it all, right? It's like, it's not random. This is not just kill something and eat it and throw blood around and that's going to satisfy your bloodlust and we're going to channel that, which is what Cass argues. It's channeling bloodlust, into a rituals. And it is reining in our appetite. I'm not going to argue it's not. It does rein in our appetite for meat. You can't just kill things when you want to and eat it because you have a hankering for a ribeye. You don't get to do that. It is very much routinized and very much put into a system where you limit people's ability to satisfy their desire for meat and their appetite for meat. You limit it. So it does do that. But it's not like this random just kill something. I just so appreciate this idea that if you're going to do that, it needs to be at the utmost awareness of our participation in how the cosmos is put together and how the relationship of the parts to the whole function. And that's how you have to do it. Yes, Susan, it means you can't You can't hate on Leviticus the
But
same
I
way.
have since I was a little kid.
I know, right? I know. So the more I get into Leviticus, I got to say, the more I appreciate it. All right, Rachel?
Yeah, so it makes me ask the question, which actually I was thinking about when you read the first very, very tangled line, which I can't really remember.
That I tangled, yeah.
Well, I mean, but because it sounds like the Hebrew is really like it is hard to translate into English. It makes me ask the question, is the purpose of Korban to draw close to God, or is the purpose of Korban to draw the community close together? And one of the things that we've talked about before and talked about in terms of creation is this idea that separation is that in order for there to be a coming together, there also has to be individuation. That two, like, if you have two partners in marriage or whatever, or in loving relationship, but they don't like merge and become one, or
Unless you're lesbian, and then they tend to merge, and then
well, okay. I mean, well, we're not talking about
that's a different conversation.
We're not talking about codependency. We're talking,
right.
But like, or you give birth to your child, right? Because it can't stay in you forever. At 9 months, it has to go, right? Like that there has to be this separation, and so that you have the separation of you have, God, you have the priests, you have the person who brought the offering and their clan, and then you have the rest of the community. And in order for, when God says, build me a mikdash that I'm, so that I may dwell among them, maybe it's not, so that I may dwell, maybe it's, so that I can bring them together. But I can't just mush them all together and have them in some big divine union. Like because that's not what we do. It has to be with their, that they remain their individuated selves. And so this, they can't just have some big, orgy around a molten calf or something. They have to. Or something, right? It has to be, there have to be these separators in some sense.
Beautifully said, the implications of what we just explained. And remember, what is the word that's going to be used for holy? Kadosh. Set apart.
Right.
It is more and more sophisticated to me that separation is how we become whole. And yes, I believe that it's not just about coming close to God. Yes, it's about the people coming close to each other. That's the point. You have to eat the whole animal. So you have to come together in a communal experience. You can't bring a sacrifice and go home and eat it. Right? You bring everyone together. Yes. I think that is absolutely the point. I think it's also the point made when you have all of the 12 tribes with their different flags around the Mishkan, because they stay different tribes. They don't become one undifferentiated people, because that's not who we are. We're different clans and different families and different orientations and different whatever. Very nice. Lori?
You may have covered this many times before, but can you just briefly explain what are the circumstances under which someone would bring a sacrifice? Because there was like the well-being, if you want to be drawn close, but that implies that they're not all that there are other reasons you would be bringing a sacrifice.
Yes, beautiful. So sin, so to repair the relationship because there's been sin. If one becomes impure, then the return to to normalcy, to regularity, involves a sacrifice. So again, a repair of the relationship, a drawing close when there's been distance. And the shlamim, when you feel like that something is going really well, you feel really grateful, then you want to come even closer, so you bring a sacrifice. And then there are appointed sacrifices for Shabbat, for Chagim, for holidays. There are special cases, like when one like I said, becomes impure, but that happens through childbirth. That happens in lots of different ways during one's experience. And so those are some of the circumstances under which one might bring. If one becomes a Nazir, one decides to become a Nazirite. At the end of that, one has to bring a sin offering. So it's not always evident what a sin offering, what that means. But we get a very detailed description. Not to worry, you're going to learn. You're going to learn a lot about when we bring a sacrifice and what we bring for that sacrifice.
Stay tuned. Thanks.
It's this article that I was looking at by Rabbi Wendy Zierler on sacrifices and life, wholeness, dismembered but remembered. Think about that. The word remember. Holy buckets. Remember. Well, you have to have dismembered before you have remembered. Oh my God. Okay. That kind of blew me away. So she talks about the animals brought to the tent of meeting. The person lays his or her hand upon its head. The priest slaughters the animal, dashes its blood on the altar, after which it is dismembered into pieces. The priest shall lay out the pieces and turn the whole thing into smoke. To use a mixed metaphor here, she says, dismemberment is not a bug in the sacrificial system. It's a feature. One takes something whole, dismembers it, and it thus becomes an olah, a whole burnt offering pleasing to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. In other words, dismemberment of a whole is necessary in order to create a new whole. One thinks about the creation of the world as described in Genesis 1, this notion becomes clearer. When God creates the world we live in now, God begins with the world as it was before, a tohu vavohu, an undifferentiated mass. And then there is light, followed by a series of distinctions between light and dark, evening and morning, upper and lower waters, heaven and earth, land and sea, male and female. And so it is that the tamimut, or undifferentiated wholeness of the primordial world, is systematically dismembered and gives way to a new wholeness, the created world. In human experience, this process of dismembering a whole to create another is mirrored in human experience as well, like Rachel pointed out. Since the beginning of time, human knowledge, devotion, and life have been a continual process and effort of dismembering and subsequent remembering, meaning reassembling the sundered pieces into new experiential and cognitive wholes. The experience goes all the way back to the womb, where we are one with our mothers, differentiated from them at birth, and begin the process of growth that reconstitutes each of us as a unique whole. Human life, knowledge, and devotion may begin in wholeness, but almost immediately, this wholeness gives way to differentiation and a splitting off into constituent parts. Although there is pain in this, there is also hope, as each dismemberment leads to a new remembering. Okay, Mark is nodding, Tamara's nodding, Lee's nodding, Lori's not. Everyone's nodding, right? Because doesn't this land somewhere where it's hard to even articulate? I mean, she articulated it well, but like, we're all nodding, I think, because it's like, of course. Like, once you know that, it's like, well, of course. There has to be a whole that splits and then a new whole on the other side of that. A dismembering that becomes a remembering, right? The embryo, I mean, the whatever it is, the zygote has to split, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. So like cells have to divide, things have to split in order for there to be a remembering that is different, but not unrelated to the whole that came before. And the whole that comes after is not unrelated to the dismemberment parts either. Okay, now I'm confusing myself, but Alex, help me.
So this could be looked at as any type of sacrifice, whether we make it by choice or by not can dislocate, can separate, and then bring us back together in something hopefully better.
Very nice, Alex. So one friendly amendment: sacrifice by definition entails intention of coming close. Otherwise, you're just killing something and eating it. But wait,
I'm talking about more like a metaphor.
I want to go to your point.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if we're talking about something like, let's say, somebody's town burning down, like if that could happen, let's just imagine, a catastrophe that one didn't choose, my friendly amendment is, but one can bring to that dismemberment an intention of drawing close and behaving in ways that make a remembering on the other side of it that is that is a different whole than what came before. It is the intention, I think, that changes it from just disaster or just killing an animal to make McDonald's and a korban, something that helps us draw close to each other and to the divine. They're both the same circumstances in a way, right? That you're killing something and eating it. What makes it a korban, something that draws us close and it makes a different kind of whole, is our intention. So we can either just be victims of a catastrophe, in which case maybe we don't come closer. Maybe we're not any better than we were before. Maybe we're worse. Maybe we're cynical and what's the point? And now I'm angry, and now I just want to, which I have to say, there are days. I'm really pissed off, and that's all I am, and just want to get revenge on the world. So there's that. But if one takes all of that and all of our suffering and all of our loss and all of our separation, and one intentionally uses it through all the kinds of things we're doing together, learning together, talking about it, processing it, Palisade Strong, Team Pally, all the ways that we're pulling together intentionally, then with that intention, it can become a korban. Does that?
And a lot of times you have to take something apart in order to put it back, obviously to put it back together, but you have to take something apart to be able to see what it was as a whole and then how it can be changed. So a lot of times, whether it's by what's interesting to think about is this is an offering made by the people, right? For something holy. But what about if the offering is of a divine sacrifice? So in other words, sometimes that we as a whole, the people, have to be sacrificed and taken apart in order, and whether we think of it as our choice, or I know this is a stretch, or the choice of Godding, the divine, the universe, whatever, it's still many times we're moving along as a cohesive and not seeing the bigger picture. And the only way to do that, right, is to be taken apart piece by piece and rebuilt in some sort of hopefully better way. And then often we are rebuilt and we're still learning, still having to make that same sacrifice because there's holes in the part.
Okay. Again, a friendly amendment. English does not serve us very well in this conversation. So to say being God's sacrifice just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
So it's our sacrifice, people's, right?
I think, again, it's the the sacrificial system of Leviticus is, and the building of the Mishkan, the way it's put together, all of that. What it's acknowledging is the absolute truth that in order to come to some kind of different new understanding, something has to be taken apart, which is what you're saying. The question is, can we acknowledge that when it's an unpleasant coming apartness? Right? So I agree with you. Yes, I think Torah is saying in order to reconstruct, you have to deconstruct. But if you just deconstruct, that's not very fun. But if we can in deconstruction, whether it's our choice or not, which is what I hear you saying, if we're going through deconstruction, can we hold that as an opportunity for reconstruction on the other side? And I believe Torah is saying that's up to us. Can that be something that draws us closer? That is on us. And that's about our intention and what we do or don't do with the circumstances of coming apart. But yes, that is the nature of the world, is to come apart in order for there to be something, a new whole on the other side, and a relationship between. Like when Eliana was born, I didn't cease to exist. Well, my individual life ceased to exist. I can tell you that right now. But I didn't cease to exist. I came into relationship with her. We were now two distinct human beings, but our relationship is a new whole that was only possible because we were separated. Okay, Susan?
So it made me think of getting old, which I'm doing. And I've lost friends, and when those friends were lost, I thought that there could never be depth of friendship again. So it's a disassembling, and I've come back to where there is that again. But yet with the awareness that it'll be lost again.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautifully said. This is an expression of what is. This is the truth, which I guess is what I appreciate so much about it this year, is it's just true. Leviticus is describing what is true. It's asking us, which Alex said so beautifully, and Rachel, it's all of y'all, it's asking us to come to that truth with intention of allowing our experience of breaking apart to create a different whole on the other side.
I'm sorry, can I ask a quick clarifying question to your point?
Yes.
When you said from coming to the sacrifice, right, in a democratic way, because all of the offerings were seen, shall we say, equitably. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean in terms of all of this?
So I think maybe if somebody has a earth-shattering experience, right, there's a hole on the other side of that. There's also a hole on the other side of my kid flunked her final exam. There's also a coming apart there, right? It doesn't have to be the biggest, hugest ever. Every single experience of coming apart has its experience or the potential to be something that brings us together and closer to the divine and each other, or parts of ourselves, or whatever on the other side. What the ingredient that does that is intention. Laying one's hand on the head of the animal and saying, it is my intention for this to be a korban. Shabbat shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.